Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Dude, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you're the founder of Browserbase. This is the second time you're doing this. You just sold a company. But Browserbase is teaching AI how to use the web. And I've been seeing you guys everywhere. So when we initially DM'd, it was like, I was like, I've kind of seen this name before. And then I tapped on your profile. I was like, definitely seen this name before.
It's the bee emoji, right? Like you see the bee emoji everywhere.
Yeah. And so first off, what do you mean when you guys say that like you're teaching AI how to use the web?
Yeah. So first and foremost, humans have been interacting with computers for a long time using websites, but computers interact with each other using APIs. I think in the future, computers will interact with each other just like humans do using a website and a web browser. So we're really enabling computers or AI to go out and automate tasks on the web, click buttons, fill in forms, go to websites. That's where all humans do their work. AI needs to be able to do that too. But the infrastructure for that is pretty hard to build. It's, you get blocked all the time. Like you have to run these like complex, browser infrastructure, these Kubernetes containers.
Kubernetes.
If you have to use Kubernetes, you're done, right?
Yeah.
So what we're doing is just making that web browser infrastructure really easy for AI applications to integrate. And in the future, we're building an SDK where AI developers can actually use natural language to automate a web page super simply.
So who are you selling to? Because I assume you're not selling to the AIs themselves.
No, not yet, right?
Yeah.
We're selling completely to developers. So AI engineers who are building an application that needs to go out and maybe automate some high value tasks.
So dev tools in general are hard to me, or like they seem hard to understand just because it's not as big of a user group as if you were just going after like consumer social, but it seems like you guys have done a really good job of making everyone hear about you. So like what actually went into your growth strategy in your initial kind of like days?
Yeah, I mean, we blew up. Like what we did first of all was we had a video. It was like a manifesto. Basically, I got in front of a camera and I said, I'm just going to talk about what we want to build and why. We showed no product in this video at all. We just kind of just vibes. It was like, there was an American flag, there was a secret plan behind me. And I was just talking at this video saying like, hey, this is the future of computing. This is how applications will work in the future. They're going to be automating tasks for you. They're not just going to be making you faster at doing work. They're going to do the work for you itself. And that's all going to be powered by a web browser. And that message really resonated with people, spread out on Twitter. And of course we had, angel investors and advisors and people we built relationships with help amplify it. So really, I think to build awareness of a brand new thing, you have to have, the first 100 fans are going to put their hand up and say, I like Browserbase, I trust this company, and I want to use it. And from there, you'll get that kind of organic word of mouth growth that's so important to building sustainable growth motions for these kinds of companies.
So I think we've seen a lot of companies now go the route of making a really big splash with a video. Like Anti-Metal did a really good video from Matt a couple weeks ago. And we've seen a lot of companies now do it in dev tools, in like just typical B2B SaaS, a lot of them in like the drones kind of like hardware space. What do you do after your video goes viral to actually capture that hype?
First, you shout out your videographer, shout out Austin, amazing guy.
Austin from Solaris?
Yeah.
No way.
He made it. He's awesome. I mean, like finding great talent to help you produce things. I can't shoot videos. I can just talk about what I love. So you got to have the right people to do it. But once you go viral, you need to make sure you're capturing that momentum. I'm responding to every DM that I can.
Really?
You have that call to action, that website, making sure people are reaching out. Our wait list is super long.
You had a wait list?
Yeah, we had a wait list, but we don't even pull from the wait list. The way to get off the wait list is to DM me or email me. That's how we know who's actually like really, really interested in the product. Of course, there's a few people we pulled off the wait list who are great logos, but just generally, there's so much demand for Browserbase that we actually can't like satisfy all of it. So we have to be really selective about who we pull off. And those are the people who are the most passionate. I've always kind of thought about what's most important for my second company. And it's actually about having the 100 true fans. Like who are the 100 people who are going to love your product? That's the thing that's going to get you closer to product market fit than the people who are just like vibe seekers who are just driving by and saying, oh yeah, this is kind of cool, but aren't really invested.
So there's like this interesting concept. And I think Furkan kind of talked about it a lot. And he's like, you need to make sure when you're starting off with your first batch of users that you're pulling it off the wait list, they have to be like the right kind of users, because if you have the wrong kind of users, it'll derail the product. The feedback won't be valuable. Some users will hijack your product and pretend that it's not good because it's not serving their goal. And so my question is, when you were initially filtering through all of this traction that you got, or all of these users on your wait list, what was your criteria for figuring out who to pull in?
Yeah. I think it was the number of swear words per email. Like what? Seriously, like you could tell when someone really sees your problem when there's like, I hate this thing and I need someone to solve it for me. There's like a degree of like energy that people send in when they reach out about this problem. And that's how you kind of know these are the people who actually spend a lot of time on it. I think sometimes when you have good copy and like good hero copy on a marketing website specifically, like the problem will resonate with a lot of people, but they may be people who are kind of like expecting to see this problem and aren't feeling it right now. So for us, we've really tried to qualify based on who needs this problem the most, who's having the most pain, and who's going to run in the door when we open it up so they can onboard right away.
That makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense. And then from the investor side of things, you guys have a crazy stat, which is you raised something like 6 or 7 million within 90 days. So you
Yeah.
did a pre-seed and a seed round
Yeah.
within 90 days.
The pre-seed round wasn't even closed when we raised the seed round. We had to close it the same day.
So you closed your seed round in one day?
We closed our pre-seed round the same day we raised our seed round. So the pre-seed was basically done. It was all safes. First of all, we raised 6.5 million in 90 days, which is a crazy stat. And I'm super grateful for our investors. Like they're all just amazing people. And I'm so happy with our cap table, but we got the first 2 million basically in the first day. We're taking some small checks in, and then, 90 days later, the seed round comes in, Klein Perkins leading, AI grant participating. And we had to say, okay, the pre-seed is officially closed. No more investments. Now we're in the seed round, all really fast. But I think that just goes to show that when you have a degree of like maturity of thought, of like how a space will play out, you can prove out a lot of things in the first 90 days. And that's what we did.
What do you mean by maturity of thought? Like what was your thought process that separated you from all of these other dev tools?
Well, yeah. I mean, you mentioned this before. I'm a second-time founder. I did not want to start another company. That's like,
Really?
Yeah, it was the last thing on my list, because if no one should want to start a company just to start a company.
Absolutely.
It should be a means of last resort. And Browserbase was like, okay, I have to do this. And it was really because I had this deep expertise in this thing called headless Chrome, headless browsers. And there was a huge need for like experience in a product in the space to make it easier for people building applications to use headless browsers. And that's really where I was like, I have to start this company. So before I even started it, in November, I wrote a memo. It was a 3,000 word memo about, an internet browser for AI. What does an internet browser for AI look like? I wrote that.
I've read this before.
Maybe it actually got some like good shares,
Yeah,
right?
I've read it.
I sent it to everybody. And that was like my version of building public. I put my secret plan in a memo form, and I sent it to the people who always say my ideas are bad. I say, is this a bad idea? Give it a read. And they're like, no, this has some legs. So then I did 50 customer interviews. By the time I had all that, I had like a lot of validation of what we were trying to build.
50 customer interviews.
Yeah. And I went out and I talked to like basically DM people on Twitter.
Nice.
I looked at companies that I would think would use our product. I got intros to people. And then from there, I was like, oh, this is definitely a hair on fire problem. We need to start building this yesterday. So I quit my job, went out, started building, and the fundraising story was pretty fast to follow afterwards.
It feels very calculated. And so one thing I've been thinking about recently, starting a company 10 years ago, like when Airbnb, or I don't know when it was starting, but like around the time of Airbnb or Stripe, it felt like the way people describe it, it was a lot of guessing. It was a lot of just like putting your head down, having no idea what comes next. But from the way you're explaining it, it feels like you knew exactly what you were doing every step of the way. Is that true, or am I just kind of oversimplifying it?
I mean, hopefully it looks like that, but you're always figuring it out as you go, right? Like, I think I've been really intentional about truth seeking with this problem. Like, am I actually solving a real problem? Because in my last company, we pivoted 3 times. We spent a lot of time trying to find a problem, and you kind of learn those lessons in blood when you have to pivot, because pivots are so hard on a company. So yeah, for this one, I was like, okay, I need to make sure I have people who are willing to buy it right away. The day I quit my job was the day that a customer said, I'll pay for this. I said, okay, sounds good. I'm going to walk up and quit my job. And I did that. I walked right into the office, went up to our COO on a Friday. He wasn't expecting that conversation. I wasn't either, for what it's worth. But from there, it's just been kind of like a series of incremental steps. Like, I wake up every morning, like, what's the one thing I can do to make our company better? And for us, it's been, okay, building product, getting the word out, talking to customers, talking to potential hires, talking to more investors. I try and do a little bit less of that these days after all the craziness of our fundraising. But it's always incremental. So I think like maybe one of my biggest weaknesses, I'm probably not the best visionary. Like I have a vision of the future of where I want it to go, but I'm actually like painfully pragmatic. Like I very much think that the next step is not given to us or assured. So I have to go earn that next step. And, I'm not even thinking 20 steps ahead. I'm really just trying to make, what I say to our team is that the next 30 days of our company are the most important 30 days. I think I've said that every month for the past 3 months. So, you know, like we're trying to earn every single month before we get comfortable and start planning for the next 10 years.
You know, what's interesting is you kind of context switched from a fundraising perspective very quickly, because from an investment perspective, I think that like, you know, or I'm thinking that like with a pre-seed, you're investing in the founder, you're investing in like the vision, the founder's ability to execute, whatever. But on a seed round, it feels a little bit more metrics driven or a little bit more traction driven. How did you kind of navigate going from one to the other so quickly?
I think the big difference between pre-seed and seed is really clarity of thought and evidence. So from like our pre-seed, where I had a memo and a light fundraising deck, but a lot of like pre-existing relationships, I went to the seed where I had the same memo, the same slide deck, but I had evidence like, hey, here's what I said in January. It's now March, and here's what we've done so far. Here's the customers that actually match this state of the world that we predicted. There's going to be many verticalized software companies that are using AI to automate some task. That's a high value task. And they're going to be using a web browser to do it. And we can power that web browser. And one of the things I said in the pitch is that Browserbase is really like an index fund for all AI companies. Like, you know, when you bet on Browserbase, you're betting on AI as a category because they're all going to need web browsers.
That's a good way to frame it.
Yeah. People aren't building GPT wrappers anymore. They're building Browserbase wrappers.
That's very solid.
Yeah.
And when you were talking to these investors, was their initial reactions a lot of like very positive, I want to invest? Or was it still kind of FOMO driven where it's like, oh, KP's coming in, AI grant, we just went through an AI grant?
Yeah. I think once you have a term sheet, you have ball control. And fundraising is all about ball control, like making sure that you're driving the conversations. For us, we weren't raising until it was pretty much there, right? And I think the biggest lesson on fundraising that I would love to share with other founders, especially now I've doing it twice or 3 times, is that like a shotgun wedding never works. Like you should be meeting partners 6 months before you raise, or a year, and just so they know who you are and you have that pre-existing relationship. I've actually my only lead investors, I've known them for both a year plus before I work with them. And I wasn't raising when I met them, but I said, hey, like I'm Paul, here's what I'm interested in. What are you working on? What are you interested in? And just kind of like exchanged pleasantries, kept in touch, sent them stuff I was working on, followed each other on Twitter, and just tried to like build that relationship. So when it comes time to raise and you're on a tight timeline, you can close that really, really quickly.
And so I want to talk about traction in a second, but before we go there, a lot of people who have come on this podcast have actually gone through AI grant. So like, you know, Rahul, Sharif, and a bunch of others. What is it about AI grant that is so special? Because it feels like all the companies that come out of it are like very top tier, and the people who come out of it speak very, very highly about it.
Oh yeah. I mean, AI grant is everything to this company. I think it was a huge turning point for us to land that. And I think what's special about it is, you know, Nat Friedman and Daniel Gross, just 2 extremely talented individuals, brilliant people. When we interviewed with Daniel, you know, I kind of pitched him the idea. He said, oh yeah, seems good. And then when I talked to him a few weeks later, he's like, well, listen, I tried to build something without Browserbase, and then I realized how hard it was. So now it all makes sense for me, and I'm really interested. And that was like really cool. No other investor had actually like validated the thing that we were saying, that it's actually hard to run a headless browser and it's hard to automate tasks online right now. And Daniel did. So that was just shows like how savvy of investors they are. They really do validate the things that you're talking about when you meet with them. And the community is great. I mean, I think it's just some of the best people in AI. And I feel like we're lucky to be included. I feel like we snuck in somehow, you know?
What specifically within that community is so special?
It's just the candidness, you know, like they have this like kickoff weekend where everyone goes, you meet the other founders, and everyone's just super candid, which is something that you don't get very often. They do a good job of picking the batch, and you kind of get to hear everyone's problems. Like everyone has problems. Every founder has problems, and being able to kind of like talk with somebody else about the things that are going on in their business. A lot of these companies are at similar stages. I walked away from that, like having met like new customers, but also like new friends and people that I'm going to bounce ideas off of for future things.
Awesome. And then now to talk about traction, what does your growth look like?
Yeah, it's definitely a hockey stick, you know, nice. And we've had our best sales day every single week for the past 6 weeks, you know, really? In terms of new subscription. That's all waitlist. So we're pulling people off and they're signing up for, you know, the more expensive plan. We have a $39 a month plan and a $99 a month plan. What I think I care more about though than actually the top line revenue metrics, which are exciting, are actually like customer usage metrics. I think this is like a common trap that founders can get stuck in, where they're so focused on MRR and they're trying to make the MRR number go up. They want the Stripe screenshots in the group chat, right? Classic. But what actually matters is like, are people using your stuff? Are they coming to the product every day? And we use Clerk for authentication. And I get this email every week like, congrats, you had your biggest week of Browserbase. We had X more users than last week, or X more users came back. And seeing people use the platform and seeing like our KPI is how many minutes of browsers are being used, like how many automations are being run. That's been increasing, 100% week over week for the past 4 or 5 weeks.
Are you still driving people to the wait list?
Yeah, it's not intentional, to drive to. I think what we're doing more is just talking about Browserbase and like, how are we talking about Browserbase?
Yeah, like on Twitter, like
yeah, on Twitter in person. I think like what I do is just try and be everywhere. I'm trying to be the headless browser guy of San Francisco, You're going
to put that in your Twitter bio, the headless browser guy?
It's already there.
No way.
Yeah, come on. And the goal is really sell through just being helpful. Like there's a lot of people who we haven't sold to yet, but they're in our Slack and we're offering them advice. We're offering them like strategies and like, hey, what are you trying to build? Oh, you want to try and purchase this thing from this website? Here's the flow that we would use. Here's the tools that we use. Or have you seen Web Llama, this new model? This is really helpful. And like our bet is that this problem it's pretty hard to maintain this. You have to work with like proxy vendors. You have to build your own CAPTCHA bypass. You need to have some sort of logging and observability, which is pretty painful, just so you can see what the AI is doing in the browser. So for us, we know that we have like a really compelling long-term sales motion because someone's going to want to stop maintaining this at some point. My advice for founders is like, you should outsource everything you can that's not core to your business so you can focus on getting the PMF, because that's the hardest problem. It's not building auth. It's not managing browsers or your database. It's building the features that your customers want.
Do you think you found PMF?
I don't want to jinx anything. I'm like I said, the next 30 days are the most important for our company. I think I'll feel comfortable with us saying we have PMF when we open up self-service and we have, strong retention of those cohorts, because we're doing, manual onboarding where I'm talking to people every call. It's a non-scalable growth metric, but it works really well. So for me, PMF is not only just like product retention and growth, it's also like, do you have a repeatable distribution motion? And we're starting to see inklings of that. Like social media is one of our biggest channels. Word of mouth is one of our biggest channels for inbound. I want to make sure that we have repeatable strategies before I declare PMF to be discovered.
And by social media, do you mean your personal account and then the company account?
Yeah. I mean, I am both of the accounts. Don't tell anybody, but I make the memes and I also like them on both accounts, right?
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. I don't know.
The game is the game.
Yeah. But the company account's growing pretty well. And I think we're discovering our brand voice really nicely.
That's always hard.
It's super playful. Our logo is literally an emoji.
Nice.
Is that even legal? I don't know. We're going to find out.
I guess we'll find out.
But for now, it's just been really about just celebrating our customers. Actually, the best content we have is saying, hey, someone built this on Browserbase, and sharing that with the world. And that really resonates with the audience. First of all, because people like to see the interesting stuff people are building, but also helps people understand what we're doing. Because they're like, oh, this is built on Browserbase. This is what Browserbase does.
You know, what's really interesting about that, you mentioned kind of showing case studies of people using your product as a growth mechanism. I have a friend, I won't say what the name of the agency is, but he's doing a couple $1 million a year in revenue specifically for copywriting. And so one of the ways he gets clients is that he pulls people once they're in the sales cycle into an email list. On average, a lot of software tools and a lot of agencies will send feature updates, like, hey, we just launched a new feature. Or with the agency, it's like, hey, we just brought on this new client, or kind of things in the relation to here are new things that we're building. Whereas what he did to make it work is he just started sharing case studies every single week of here is our core package. Here's how Slack, for example, used our core package to drive XYZ. Or here's how this new company that we brought on used our package to drive X, Y, and Z. And even with some of the tools that I've advised myself, we saw a very clear shift in the email conversions once they shifted from new feature just dropped and the typical feature spotlights and new ship updates or feature releases, to here's how X founder uses our tool, to, you know, do Y, or like, here's how this new user that met us on Twitter is now using our tool to do X, Y, and Z. Because when you actually tell the story of how someone else using your product, it's much more tangible for a potential customer than like, hey, here's a feature that we just launched on a product you've never used. Come buy this product.
Yeah. I mean, social proof is the most powerful drug for getting people to do things, right? Like we see it in our day-to-day lives. If there's a line outside of a restaurant, people are gonna be like, what's in that restaurant? Like they're curious. So for us, like, not only does it give us legitimacy as a company, we're not just a landing page and a Twitter account with fire memes. We're actually like a company that has customers, and our customers are talking about us and we're promoting them. I actually authentically just love talking about our customers and like giving them a pedestal. Like I want them to, like, when they launch something, I want to show it to the world too. Like I feel really proud of that. So it's definitely not only a good growth tactic, but your customers like you for that. Like you're also marketing to, you know, other AI developers, other VCs. It's helpful.
And what's interesting also about your story is you've kind of seen dev tools from the early stage perspective, but also you were at Twilio when it IPO'd, which is kind of like, you know, in the dev tool world, you could consider Twilio almost like in the A list. So what was that like when you were working there? Because I think you were an intern, right?
Yeah. So my first day in tech ever, I was an intern at Twilio in 2016. And we have this all hands where the interns get introduced, right? So we come on stage, we say a fun fact, we sit down. It was maybe 800 people. So it wasn't huge, but it wasn't small either. Jeff Lawson, CEO of Twilio, like a total legend in the dev tool space. He like introduces us and then he's like, okay, one more thing. We're IPOing in 2 weeks. Here's our S1. And everyone goes crazy. And I'm just sitting there. It's my first day of work. I'm like, whoa, like what do we do? Interns don't have equity, by the way.
Yeah.
So we all, you know, it was one of the best summers to be at Twilio and to see, you know, the team really celebrate and growth continue to go through that IPO. I remember going to the IPO party and seeing my coworkers just getting super rich and happy. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, this is not going to be my last IPO. And it's my first time at an open bar. I was like, this is awesome too. You know, IPO parties are great. I want to do this again. So I went on to stay there for 3 years before starting my first company, Stream Club, and really learn from, you know, the Twilio team, which, like you said, was one of the OGs in dev tools. And a lot of that DNA is now in Browserbase.
If you had to like tactically say what specifically from Twilio you've like pulled along into Stream Club and then now Browserbase, what are some of the takeaways?
You have to have an MBA in your business. Like, it's a weird thing to say, but those all hands meetings where our CFO, Lee Kilpatrick, would like break down the metrics of why Twilio is succeeding, why the public markets like or dislike us. It really gave me like a whole new business perspective on software and enterprise. And I thought that was like just invaluable, where now I have, you know, net dollar retention baked into my brain as being a valuable figure for enterprise growth, right? And when I think about Browserbase, a lot of the same things I look at were the things that we covered in Twilio's all hands in terms of like, what are the KPIs that actually matter? Like, it's not just about revenue. It's actually about usage. It's about retention. I think that was really new to me because I was just a developer. And I went from developer to entrepreneur because of Twilio.
That's interesting. I think you might be the first person to come on this podcast and say you need an MBA on your team.
It's not like you need an MBA on your team. It's you need to have an MBA in your business. You need to know deeply the mechanics of your business. Like,
that makes sense.
I'm a technical guy. I've always been an engineer. I was CTO of my last company, but I love Browserbase because I can sell something for pennies that somebody else sells for dollars. And that's a win-win scenario where I get good margins, they get great margins, and it allows for us to build an enduring business. And I think like a lot of people go into a company thinking about great technology. I also love great technology, but I also like great businesses. Like, we're here to build enduring businesses, and you have to think from first principles about what that means. So is it defensible? What are the 7 powers? Like, all of that stuff.
Now that it's your second time starting a company, do you feel like you have to, I need to figure out the best way to position this, but like, do you feel like you have to grind as hard and like kind of eat dirt as much as you did on your first one? Or are a lot of lessons kind of like already learned, and so you can kind of live a little bit more comfortably?
Yeah, I'm grinding harder. Like, it feels like to me much more clear what the opportunity is ahead of us. And I know the path that we have to do to take it. So it's not like we're wandering. I think we were wandering a lot more in the first one. It feels like a straight line, and I just have to run at it as hard as possible.
So what does a day in your life look like?
Oof. I'll tell you today. So I wake up 7 a.m. I see a Slack message. Okay, there's an error. We need to fix this error ASAP.
Damn, bro, no cold shower?
Yeah, no cold shower. It's actually, my Aura score is probably the worst it's been since I started. Like, it's a huge dip in health. So
Brian Johnson would never, man.
Brian Johnson would hate me for sure.
He's come to Solaris, right?
Yeah. He's definitely come. I haven't met him yet. I'm actually, I think starting a company definitely shortens your life, not long and long.
100%.
So, but yeah, like wake up, we take care of the fires that may have happened overnight. And then today has just been all customer calls, wall to wall, 7:30 to now. And then I'll go back, customer calls, hang with the team for a team dinner for our new employee.
Nice.
Hang out with my wife later. She's the reason why I can do this so well, because I'm lucky to have a support network.
That's nice.
And that's the most important thing.
That's awesome. What is it about your team that lets you focus on, because you're building a very technical product, what is it about the team that lets you focus on the selling and the customer service while they kind of take care of the actual building out of the product?
I think it's essential for the founder to be doing sales and customer support for as long as possible until it's like actually no longer a one-person job. And I built a lot of our product. I feel like I'm going to get fired from coding pretty soon. Actually, the guys are getting tired of my PRs, because they're better at it. They're craftsmen. I'm a bit more of a hacker. And I've really built a team of people who have experience with developer tools, and they're just super thoughtful about how are we building something that works for today and, 1 month, 3 months, 9 months down the line. So they're really able to kind of have the time and space to write code. I think founders who try and do everything often do a bad job at everything. So I've really tried and pivoted more towards the go-to-market side of the house while I let them kind of clean up my messes on the code side, because there's quite a few they got to take care of.
I saw this tweet a couple of days ago, and it was like the CEO of a company had posted, POV, you let your CTO take over for the weekend. And it was like, it was a GitHub commit or a
re-architected the code base, right? Or something.
Yeah, it's like, refactored the entire code base and like 72 commits. And it was hilarious. Because it's true, right? Like even in my friends' companies where the CEO like initially built the product, now their team just tells them to stay far away from the code base and just focus on getting more customers.
Yeah. I try and balance it. Like I love programming.
Yeah.
Like I actually block my schedule. So I only do customer calls Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I work on product, and I try and stay close to the team and like catch up and have no meetings. So I really am a big believer in like time blocking it. It can be pretty exhausting to like go through a day of calls and then have to go back and, my brain is pretty dead at the end of that.
It won't be productive either.
But, as a solo founder, you kind of have to do it all. And that offers me a lot of flexibility, but it's also just a little bit more intense.
Why did you decide to be a solo founder instead of picking a co-founder? Because you've built and sold a company. It wouldn't have been hard for you to find a co-founder.
Yeah, I think like I did some co-founder dating. Like I didn't want to do it solo. I was solo by means of last resort, And I just like in the end, probably like the best co-founder that could exist for me out there. It wasn't the right time for them to do it. I did some co-founder dating, and we just maybe weren't aligned on what we wanted to build. And I think anytime you're trying to force a co-founder relationship, it's not going to work out well. I think I saw a stat, which was like
most companies fail because of co-founder breakups in the early days.
I even saw a crazier one, and I'm not sure if this is accurate or not, but like from like a year or two ago in YC, like of the companies that failed, 40% of them failed from founder breakups, which is like so brutal. It feels like a self-inflicted gunshot wound in a lot of ways.
100%, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What are some of like the biggest differences in building this company? Again, second time founder. We've talked about it now before. Versus the first time you were kind of trying to do it. Did you have a co-founder the first time, by the way?
I had two co-founders.
So what are like some of the most stark differences?
Yeah. I think it's, the first company wasn't really me. I was a CTO of my first company.
Okay.
And really, it's so clear to me that you have to feel a company's mission deeply in your soul.
Right.
And, we were building virtual event software during the pandemic. My co-founder had this amazing thesis that I totally saw and like could feel logically, but I wasn't really as familiar with the creator space. My background was in dev tools, right? And founder market fit is totally a thing. And I think every founder needs to think about when you're starting a company, what is the founder market fit story that you can tell? Like, why are you meant to start this company? What's your unfair advantage? I don't think I had a good story for the last one. I think with this one, I have a very good story. I've been in dev tools. I sold my last company to a dev tools company, and all that just really adds up to being Browserbase is the perfect company for me to start. It's the only company I could ever see myself starting, actually.
So you don't think you would ever start another company after this one?
No way.
No way.
Yeah. What's the NVIDIA CEO say about this? Like, he's like, starting a company is like the most painful thing ever, but it's like a means of last resort. I think that's totally true. I think it's the best job I've ever had, and it's the one that I love the most, but you can't force it. You have to feel called to it, which is tough. I think a lot of people want to start companies, and
It's very trendy right now.
yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense. I would challenge people to want to solve problems and then start a company.
Yeah, that makes sense. I got this advice recently from someone on the team, which was when you try to do things or when you try to start off with ideas that are very, very grandiose, instead of breaking it down to the smallest possible like MVP or the smallest possible effort, generally grandiose ideas are just like, there's too much going on for them to actually work. And even if you have an idea that you want to eventually get to, the smartest thing to do is to work backward from there and start small, start with something measurable, something that you can take care of. And then if that works, go on to the next thing a little bit larger, the next thing a little bit larger, and then the next thing. Otherwise, you're just kind of like trying to throw all your shots at one potential very large goal that you don't fully know how to work backwards from, and you kind of end up failing.
Yeah, I blame VC for this for the most part. Like, people think that VCs need to hear the $1 billion idea. They need to have like this really clear vision to a giant, giant company. And yeah, that's true. It needs to be directionally there. But I actually think that like solving a very specific problem really well and knowing it and it being very true to you is just a much more defensible business and one that's going to last versus like chasing after this big dream that you maybe don't have any credibility launching rockets into space. You just think it's cool. Mm-hmm. That's not as enduring and feels like it's more of a long shot.
Speaking of long shots, I guess, what right now in AI is like the most interesting to you?
Yeah, I'm really excited about some of these fine-tuned models that are coming out, the fine-tuned llama models. Like there's one called Web Llama that we're looking at, which was fine-tuned on a variety of web automation tasks. And how are fine-tuned models going to change how people are building AI software? Like, I feel like, a fine-tuned model might always be better than a more general model. And I'm kind of curious to see, like, are we going to see more fine-tuning? Does everyone have their own fine-tuned model for their own specific problems? That's pretty interesting. And it's important for us because we're not just building the web browser infrastructure. We want to build this SDK that allows every developer to control a web browser with natural language. And that means our model choice for taking that natural language and converting it into code is going to be really important. So we're trying to pay attention to like what the best models are right now.
What have you started to notice so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy that the open source world is working. It's really important for our business because if OpenAI is the only AI company in the world, then they can just build everything. It's very verticalized. Mm-hmm. But the fact that there's so much open source development happening, there's so many different models, it means that there's going to be a pretty healthy ecosystem of startups that can service both things that are built on OpenAI, Anthropic, open source stuff. It's a much healthier ecosystem, which will be better for everyone building.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If we were going to have this conversation again in a year, and this is the question I ask everyone to kind of wrap things up, what would you have wanted to accomplish by then to consider the past year a success?
I think in the next year, I really want to see Browserbase powering every single major AI application. So every AI application that's creating value for their customers, it's going to have Browserbase integrated in some way. And that makes a lot of sense to me. It feels like every AI application that's valuable is going out there, automating a task. It's clicking some buttons online for you. And sometimes it doesn't even look like it's an AI application. It's not like, finance software powered by AI. It's just finance software that has a button that actually submits your form to the IRS without you realizing it, and that's all powered by a browser. So I'm excited to power like this next generation of AI applications. And like I said before, Browserbase is basically an index fund for all of AI. So we just got to keep adding to the index and keep supporting more companies.
Fire. Thanks for coming on.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me.